They say that the hour of 3 a.m. is the time when spirits can become active, and I'm sure of that. My apartment was always a little too quiet for one in the city, especially at night. No drunk shouting in the street at that time. No sound of car horns and alarms could penetrate the dark at that particular hour. It's like my apartment was high on a platform, surrounded only by a dense fog that the sharpest of hawk eyes couldn't penetrate. I was usually attempting to sleep at that time, after bleaching my skin in the pure electric light of my computer screen. Emphasis on the phrase attempting, because from that stems this tale. I advise you, if you've been here long enough to find it, you'll soon discover of what I'm talking about. I should really tell you anyway, just so you know you're not insane. I know I'm not. Every night for the past 4 months that I decided to make this apartment my home, a strange sound would pierce the strange blur that surrounds my home, or maybe just my mind. I have searched the apartment many times for it, but behind the hollow-sounding ivory walls and hard pine floors, I couldn't find any source. The sound, at first, was like scratching. If you have fingernails, drag them along a table, like that. It was slow, and every time I heard it, I froze up. It wasn't as dramatic as anything like ghostly moaning or anything like that, but it still scared me so much I reverted back into childhood and stuck my head under the blanket. During the day, I worked at what could be possibly the most boring place on earth, a factory that stamped out cans. They didn't even need workers, but I really didn't care. It paid the bills, and getting to sit around until someone needed help fixing a machine wasn't too bad. I sort of miss it. There was always something bad happening though, in retrospect. I feel as though it was following me. For instance, a man's hand ended up being caught in the stamping machine under a sheet of aluminum. The crunch was sickening. It sounded like a dog chewing upon a bone, that same splintering sound. Every night I would retire from this slightly gory boredom back to my apartment, back to my beloved computer. The cycle was always the same. Work, computer, scratching sound. I never really thought to ask anyone about it. I would just usually forget about it by morning. But one day I didn't. I sat there in my folding chair at work, surrounded by the drab, bleak gray concrete walls. A long-ignored cigarette that was gradually becoming one trembling tower of ashes in my grasp, trying to think of a way to discover whatever this thing was. Why wouldn't I just follow it? Get my nerves together and find the continual source of fear for me. It made me cold just at the thought, but I knew I had to do it. So that night I turned off the computer as usual, but then took one extra step. I grabbed a flashlight. It would be faster than dashing across the room to my light switch. It could even be mice, I thought to myself as I slipped into bed, wearing the hero's garb of any sleepy man, a pair of boxers and socks. At least if I ran crying out of the building, a few people could get a laugh. The clock slowly began to head towards 3 o'clock. My heart began to pound nervously, like a sword I held, the turn-off flashlight to my bare chest. The necklace I found around my neck felt strangely cold, even though I had at least 3 comforters on. Oh, the joys of a particularly cold winter. Closing my eyes, I heard the scratching. Slowly it got louder. My hand began to shake, but I kept my eyes shut. Why wasn't I turning on the light? Why wasn't I looking? because there was a new sound, a tinkling, strange shaking, like a maraca full of metal instead of beans or beads. A loud thunk against my door made me leap up. Turning on the flashlight, I managed to run to the light switch and flicked it on as well. With an icy, trembling hand, I opened the door. What I saw will never leave my mind. There was the source of my fear, the thing that I had somehow invaded my home. An oddly small, waif-like creature, like a starving child with skin that was too pale. It was like a corpse dropped in water, for its skin was tinged with blue. Every vein was visible. Oh, how I wanted to gag at the sight. But it gets worse. Strategically placed in this demented creature's flesh, long metal nails were embedded through the tips of its fingers and toes, sticking out of its neck and shoulders, down its chest and out its eyes. They were everywhere. How loudly I screamed? I don't know. Would anyone hear it through the fog surrounding my house? Would I hear it? I couldn't stop staring. The dried, cracking blood against that decaying flesh brought up my earlier meal, and a gushing hot river of vomit poured out of my mouth onto the ground. I backed up as the creature took a step. Its lank hair was missing in chunks, and as it stepped closer, its feet dragged upon the floor, the nails in them making a scratching sound. Why I had to keep my room in a state of continual chaos, I don't know, but the mess was astounding. Of course I fell. Scrambling back, I stared in horror at the dead thing. It didn't move right, I realized. It didn't just walk. Its motions were snappy and disjointed, and one foot dragged behind it while the other advanced towards me. In its hand there was a heavy, rusted hammer, dripping with what I hoped was water. It was slightly rust-colored. I couldn't bear to see it. But in the other there was a plastic grocery bag that sagged and poked out with the weight within it, like if someone hung a porcupine from a diaper. I felt the wall against my back. The creature moved forward. I was paralyzed with fear at the sight of it. It was so grotesque. In front of me, it stopped. I noticed the puncture marks upon its tiny calves where nails were, and I felt a strange sense of pity. The bag in its hands split a little, and the sight of what was within made me let out an audible and most likely bile-scented groan. A nail jutted out. I cried out loudly as the thing pounced upon me. As I felt the first nail go into my eye, it was worse. Through the blood blocking my vision, I could see its tiny mouth pull back in a widely toothed smile, the nails in its lips making them split and gush rotten black blood down on me. I moaned in pain again as another nail entered my second eye. Blindly I swatted, but it was to no avail. Perhaps it would be over soon. Perhaps death would be better than being tormented by this rotten thing. But still the nails entered. Still I cried out loudly, especially when I was dragged. I couldn't see where, but damn, it hurt. It's gone now, the nailed child. I don't know where it went, but I know somewhere. It will be coming out at 3 o'clock, and so will I. I think you ought to check your clock because it looks like this bag in my hand is about to split. I'm so excited to see you. This is the story of a dream. You know, the kind of dream where you suddenly become aware that you're dreaming? That was the kind of dream this was. I was all alone standing on the platform of a deserted, dimly lit railway station. Wow, what a boring dream, I thought to myself. Just then I heard an announcement come over the loudspeaker. A dull, monotone voice was saying, "The train will be arriving shortly. If you get on board, you will experience something very scary." Soon after this cryptic announcement, the train pulled into the station. However, it wasn't really a train. It looked more like the kind of train you see at amusement parks, like a roller coaster or the monkey train they had at the zoo. There were a few men and women sitting in the cars, and their faces were very pale. What a weird dream, I thought, but I was curious about the announcement I had heard. Would I really see something scary? What would it be? I decided to get on the train and find out. After all, how scary could it be if it was just something I was dreaming? I sat down in the third car from the back. The air around me felt uncomfortably warm. Everything seemed so realistic that I began to wonder if I was actually dreaming. "The train is now departing," said the announcement. As the train began to move, my heart was pounding with anticipation and anxiety. I wondered what was going to happen. Soon after the train left the platform, we entered a tunnel that was illuminated by an eerie purple light. "I've seen this tunnel before," I said to myself. It was the tunnel from a ghost train ride at an amusement park I used to visit as a kid. That's why I was dreaming about this weird monkey train. I was just remembering all the haunted house rides from my childhood. This really isn't anything to be scared of, I told myself. Just then, there was another announcement. "Next stop, Aikizukuri. Aikizukuri is next." Aikizukuri, I thought. That's not a station, it's a rare Japanese dish. A skillful Japanese chef can cut up a fish and cook it in such a way that it's still alive when they serve it to you. The poor fish lies on your plate, gasping for air while you eat it. It's grotesque, but in Japan it's considered a delicacy. I was still thinking about it when I heard a loud, piercing scream coming from behind me. I turned around and saw 4 hunchback midgets dressed in rags. They were surrounding the man in the last seat. As I looked closer, I saw that they were wearing monkey masks and brandishing large, sharp knives. Right before my eyes, they began cutting the man into pieces. They were preparing him just like a chef prepares aikizukuri. An overpowering stench filled the air, and the man kept screaming and screaming as they pulled his bloody organs out of his body and scattered them all around the train car. I noticed a sickly-looking woman with long hair sitting directly behind me. When the screaming started, she began to panic, but only for a moment. Then, she just became silent and faced the front, as if nothing was going on. I was terrified by the horrible things that were happening behind me, and I started to wonder whether or not I was really just dreaming. When I turned around again, the man in the back seat was gone. All that remained were bloodstains and chunks of red meat. The woman behind me was still staring straight ahead, her face expressionless. "Next stop, Scooping," the announcement said. "Scooping is next." This time, 2 of the monkey-face guys appeared, carrying spoons with serrated edges. They began to scoop out the eyes of the woman behind me. Up until now, she had been expressionless, but the pain twisted her face in a look of horror. She began shrieking so loudly that I thought my eardrums would burst. Her eyeballs flew out of their sockets. The stench of blood and sweat was unbearable. I was bent over, shivering in fear. This was my cue to leave. I couldn't take any more of this. "Wake up," I told myself. "I have to get out of here. Please, please wake up." Then a horrible thought struck me. Judging how things had been going, I was next in line. "Next stop, minced meat," came the announcement. "Minced meat is next." I felt sick. It wasn't hard to imagine what was going to happen next. I concentrated as hard as I could, trying desperately to force myself to wake up from this dream. "Come on, wake up," I told myself. "It's just a dream. Wake up. Come on, wake up." Suddenly, I heard a loud, metallic whirling noise. It sounded like a grinding machine. This time, the two guys were sitting on my knees. They were holding a strange-looking contraption that I assumed was a mincing machine. I was terrified. "It's all a horrible dream. Wake up. Wake up." I closed my eyes and prayed as hard as I could. "For the love of God, please wake up." The sound was getting closer and closer. I could feel the wind from the machine on my face. I was sure there was no hope for me. It was over. I was a goner for sure. Then, all of a sudden, everything went silent. I woke up in bed, soaked with sweat. Tears were streaming down my face. Somehow, I had managed to escape from the nightmare. I scrambled out of bed and went into the kitchen, where I got a drink of water and tried to calm myself down. That was horribly realistic, I thought to myself. Thank God it was only a dream. The next day at school, I told all my friends about the terrible dream I had experienced. I expected them to be horrified, but they all just thought it was funny. I guess it was, in a way. After all, it was just a dream. 4 years passed and I finished college, and I completely forgot about the dream. That's when it happened. One night when I was working late at the office, it had been a busy day and I was very tired. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes for a moment. Then I heard, "Next stop, scooping. Scooping is next." It was the same. Everything came flooding back. The same two crooked midgets in monkey masks were gouging out the eyes of the same girl. "It's just a dream. Wake up. Wake up." I started praying, but I couldn't wake up. "It's just a damn dream. Wake up." "Next stop, minced meat. Minced meat is next." "No, this is too much." The machine, it was getting closer. "It's just a dream. Wake up. Come on, please, wake up." Suddenly, there was once again silence. I had escaped again, or so I thought. Just as I was about to open my eyes, I heard a voice say, "Are you running away again? The next time we come for you will be the last." I opened my eyes, and this time I was really awake and in my room. But the announcement I had heard definitely wasn't in the dream. I had heard it here, in the real world. I know that I did. There's no mistake about it. Why me? What have I done to deserve this? I haven't had the dream since then, but I know the next time I have that dream, I'll probably die. It will probably be from a heart attack or something else like that. In this world, it might seem like a heart attack, but in the other world, I know I'll be minced meat. I want to tell you about a girl and a doll. I know what you're thinking. You've heard this story before. A little girl wants a doll. Someone buys it for her, and then the doll goes mental and kills everyone. Well, you're wrong. This is a different kind of story. It happened back in 2009 when I was 16. One day, as I was walking home from school, I noticed that a new family had moved into the house at the end of my street. They were a young married couple, and they had a little daughter who looked like she may have been around 6 years old. She wore a white dress, white socks, and black shoes, and her hair was long and black, and she was holding a doll in her arms. The doll had on a white dress and also had long black hair. In fact, it looked almost exactly like a miniature version of the girl.
Every day on my way home from school, I saw the little girl. She was always sitting there outside her house, cradling the doll in her arms and watching me as I passed by. There was something about the way she stared at me and the cold, dark look in her eyes that really unnerved me. At night, I couldn't sleep. I was plagued by the very strange dreams and woke up in a cold sweat. I can only vaguely remember the dreams, but they all involved the girl and the doll. This went on night after night, and the lack of sleep had left me exhausted. There was an old lady who had lived next door, and she was very inquisitive. She was one of these old women who knew everything about everyone, and she was always eavesdropping and sticking her nose into other people's business. One day, as I was walking to school, she grabbed me by the arm, and in a hushed tone, she said that she had something to tell me. She wanted to talk about the family who moved into the house at the end of the street. "You don't want to mess with them," she told me. "They're not good people. I've heard that they're always on the move and never stay for very long. And that daughter of theirs, did you know that she's adopted? She's not right in the head either. I've heard rumors that she's the offspring of the devil, and the doll she carries around is not a doll at all, but a demon made in her image." I just rolled my eyes and walked away, dismissing it as the idle gossip of a crazy old woman. But oh, how silly I was. How I wish I had listened to the warnings of that crazy old lady. A few days later, there was a knock at our front door. When I answered it, a young woman was standing there. She was the mother of the little girl with the doll. "Hello," she said. "I'm your neighbor, and I'd like to ask you to do me a favor." "Sure," I replied. "What is it?" "Well, something unexpectedly came up," she said, "and I have to go on an errand, and my husband doesn't get home from work until later. I'll only be gone a few hours, but I need someone to look after my daughter while I'm gone. I know it's short notice, but could you take care of her?" "Well, of course," I said. "What's your daughter's name?" "Her name is Lisa," the mother replied, "but we need to leave now, so if you don't mind." I followed the woman to her house, and I waited while she rushed upstairs. When she returned, she was leading the little girl by the hand. As soon as I saw her, I was taken aback. There was something wrong with her. Her eyes were completely black, like the eyes of a shark, and she was still clutching that wretched doll in her arms. I didn't know what it was about that doll that creeped me out so much. Perhaps it was because it looked so much like the little girl that it was disturbing and uncanny. Before I had a chance to back out, the mother said her goodbyes, then got into the car and drove away. Without a word, Lisa reached up and took me by the hand. Her skin was ice cold to the touch, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "Play with me," she said. So we went upstairs to her bedroom, but as soon as I closed the door, I began to feel uneasy. I could detect a strange, unpleasant smell in the room, but I couldn't figure out what it was or where it was coming from. I played with Lisa for about 30 minutes, but then I began to feel a tightness in my chest. I broke out into a cold sweat and my stomach was churning. I felt like I was going to vomit. "I have to go," I gasped. All of a sudden, Lisa scrambled to her feet and cried out, "No, you're not going. You're going to stay here with me forever and we'll play all the time." She stared at me with those cold black eyes, and I felt like I was going to faint. I was frightened and I wanted to get out of that room. But when I tried to open the door, the handle wouldn't turn. I began rattling it and pulling on it, but it was no use. So I ran to the window and I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. No matter what I tried, I couldn't open it. Then I remembered the warning of the old woman and cursed myself for not listening to her. I was trembling with fear, but I decided to recite a prayer. "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." As soon as I uttered those words, the little girl let out an ear-splitting screech. She screamed so loud that I thought I was going deaf and I had to clasp my hands over my ears, but I never stopped reciting the prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. The girl dropped the doll and it fell to the floor. All of a sudden, it came to life and it came at me, gnashing its teeth and scratching with its clawed hands like a feral animal. I tried to kick it away, but it jumped at my neck and tried to tear my throat out. I fell backwards on the bed, desperately trying to fight the doll off. It was a terrible struggle. The doll was thrashing back and forth, scraping me and tearing at my clothes. Every time it got its hands around my neck, it started to throttle me. Eventually, I got the upper hand. I grabbed it by the legs and swung it with all my might, smashing its head against the wall. It hit the wall so hard that it left a dent in the plaster. A crack split the doll's face in two, and a thick black smoke began pouring out. And give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. The doll lay on the floor, shaking and wriggling, flopping back and forth like a dying fish. The doll's head split wider, and the smoke billowing out grew thicker and thicker. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. When I finished reciting the prayer, Lisa was laying in the middle of the room, unconscious, and the doll was a little more than a steaming pile of molten plastic, hissing and bubbling on the carpet. Just then, Lisa's mother came home. She ran upstairs and burst into the room, demanding to know what happened. I tried to explain, but I couldn't get the words out. I threw up all over the floor. When Lisa regained consciousness, she said that she remembered nothing. Nothing at all. I looked into her eyes. The blackness was gone, and there was a bright, vibrant shade of blue. 3 years later, when she was only 9 years old, Lisa died suddenly. She had drank an entire bottle of bleach, and it corroded her insides. She died in tremendous pain, screaming and crying in agony as her organs slowly broke down and dissolved. The doctors ruled it an accident, but everybody suspected that she had taken her own life. Her parents were devastated. No one could explain why a girl so young would do such a thing. A week after the funeral, her mother and father moved out of the house. It held too many bad memories. As they were going through Lisa's bedroom and packing up her belongings, they found something glued to the back of her mirror. It was a photo of Lisa and the doll. On the other side, written in a childish scrawl, was a message. She has returned to us. For those who answer our call will be damned forever.
Thank you guys so much for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. But I've been just plain creepy, and I'll catch you in the next video.